Friends, thanks for joining me. Today's video is going to be an introduction into some of the more advanced material that we're going to cover in later videos. For the most part, we're going to be talking about truth, what it is, and how various people have described the dilemma of what is true, since language is so easily misled. If you like the content that we're bringing to you on this channel, my splash screen is right here that gives you all the information that you need to support the channel. Consider dropping us a donation, subscribing on any of the social media platforms, or send us a request for a video that you would like to see done in the future. All right. Well, before I take up too much of mine and your time, let's get started. So, the main thing that really troubles me on a day-to-day basis, as a late-stage capitalist American, is it's so hard to find consistent, reliable, true information. And this is not a political statement at all. I think both sides of the political aisle are equally guilty of doing this. And in fact, not even in the realm of politics. In the media, religion, even within your own family, there are all of these ways in which truth is manipulated. Certain people's version of the truth is put forward in front of other people's version of the truth. And this has a lot to do with power and trauma and identity, things that are not necessarily the easiest to talk about. And it becomes really problematic for people if they don't have a language to talk about truth and untruth, to talk about what's real to them and what's not real to them. Because we can get trapped in dealing with and responding to things that are happening, which are not just and are not correct and are not right and are not truthful, but that we don't have an alternative that we can actually put forward, that we don't really have a good grasp on what truth is, what our own truth is, and this can lead us to be really alienated from ourselves. The general problem, I think, is really well summed up in a famous scene in the Bible. You're going to hear me talk about the Bible and Buddhist philosophy quite a lot in this channel. Many apologies if that bores the pants off of you. I'm going to try to make it relevant every time I bring it up. In the Bible, when Jesus has been condemned to death and he's talking to Pilate, Pilate famously asks him, "What is truth?" And he says this in response to Jesus making a claim that it's the truth of the people who has put him in the position of the so-called king of the Jews. It's not a truth that he bears inside of him. The truth that he bears inside of him is that he has come to do his Father's will and to correct injustice. And if the people have empowered him, and if the religious leaders have said that he is the so-called king of the Jews, then he cannot argue that, because his truth has nothing to do with that. His truth is simply that he's come to right wrongs. In the context of all of that information that Jesus is saying, Pilate says, "What is truth?" And this really gets at the heart of the dilemma, I think. Jesus is in a position here where it doesn't matter what he says. He's already been condemned. He's not going to talk his way out of the position that he's in. And it is an unjust position. Pilate, the person who has put him directly or indirectly into that unjust position, is dismissing the truth. The truth in this case would be that Jesus does not deserve to die, that he's been put in the position that he is, not because he's a usurper or because he's rebelling against the Romans. He is rebelling against the Romans, but that's not why he's there. He's there because he's offended the religious leaders of the day. And they have pushed Pilate to arrest Jesus. And so in saying what is truth, Pilate is essentially dismissing his role in what's happening. He's dismissing the religious leader's role in what's happening. He's taking all the context out of the moment and saying, you believe what you believe, I believe what I believe, and there's no truth to be found. And we understand, looking back on this moment through history, that was a profoundly unjust idea for Pilate to express in that moment. And it was frankly wrong. Pilate knew what the truth was, but for a complicated series of reasons, be it political connections, the environment in Judea, powerful figures pressuring him to do things, he has been put himself in a position, just like Jesus has been put in a position for the two of them to be there. And without Pilate taking responsibility, we see what's about to unfold in the biblical story. Jesus is going to be put to death unless Pilate stops this. Ultimately, he chooses not to take responsibility. He chooses not to acknowledge his role in what's about to take place. And the way that people violate truth is very much like that. People very rarely outright lie. It's more that they manipulate the context of truth and only take bits of it that help to form the opinion that they want to have, and they'll leave the rest be. In the next couple of video series that I have planned out, we're going to look at some of the ways that people can misuse the truth and have a bad relationship with the truth, generally encapsulated in a term I call bad faith. And at the end of that video series, we're going to look at maybe what good faith would look like. You know, somebody who actually is standing up for truth regardless of the consequences. In this video, though, I want to get more into depth into what I'm actually saying when I say that something is true. Reason being is because, philosophically speaking, epistemology and etymology are kind of the forever problem of humanity. What exists and how do we describe it and name it and talk about it? In Chinese philosophy, this problem is highlighted very early. Lao Tzu makes the claim, Lao Tzu just means old sage, it means like a conglomeration of Taoist writers, but they make the claim in a book called the Tao Te Ching that the spoken Tao is not the real Tao, meaning the way that you can talk about things is not the way that things actually are. Phrased differently in a couple of different disciplines, Ludwig Wittgenstein said famously that the meaning of a thing comes out of an image of an object that really exists, and that if you can't put concrete language onto an object, there's no real way to talk about it in any sort of objective or scientific way. This is a serious problem because most of the things that we undertake in our lives are not objective. They're emotional, they're subjective, they're nuanced, they're not strictly determined. The way that you approach things and the way that you advocate for your own version of the truth is often much more powerful than your circumstances walking into a situation were. Meaning that you are very much an active agent. You are not being tossed around by the flood of history. You are very much a swimmer in the river of history. And it's primarily by orienting yourself to truth, to your truth, that you navigate. Now this, your truth that you navigate by, this is in Buddhism called relative truth. It means it relates to where you are. If I am in Santa Fe and I want to go to Dallas, I go east. But if I'm in Bridgeport and I want to go to Dallas and I go east, I'm going to end up in the ocean. So a relative truth is something that depends on where you are. It depends on the circumstances of what you're saying. And then you have an ultimate truth. An ultimate truth is something that's generally applicable. It's universally applicable. It's something that goes deeper than the surface level interactions of relational truths. So anything that you talk about can ultimately seem to be, the term for this in philosophy is a Hegelian dialectic. The Hegelian dialectic takes a truth and a counter-truth and kind of synthesizes it together into a different thing. We're sort of talking about that, but almost a flipped picture of that, where on top of any event that you look at are conflicting, contradictory relative truths. The person who's standing on the left says, I'm looking right. The person on the right says, I'm looking left. Both of those are true from the positions that they are. But there is one unifying ultimate truth underneath. And that truth, if not acknowledged, leads to all sorts of manipulations of the relative reality, twisting around the fabric of reality for people to try to get you to see things from their perspective. Ultimately, the price we pay for language and for being an intelligent species is that a lot of the way that we determine what the world is now is linguistic. It has to do with matters of truth and language and what you call something and how you describe it, and is that accurate? Whereas animals just experience whatever is happening. There's no room for bad faith for an animal. There's no room for lying. And so they're seeing the relative truth and they're seeing the absolute truth. And those two things fuse together for something simple like a cat or a dog in a way that they'll never fuse together for you as a human, because the things that you feel inside will never match up perfectly with the things that society tells you. It is your obligation as a person to determine what the truth is for you, to see what the truth is for society, and then determine where you will fit into that. Will you rebel against the society? Will you join the society? Will you attempt to reform it? Will you hold it in quiet contempt? Will you, love and cherish it and think it's perfect? How you relate to society and to other people is ultimately going to be an expression of how you relate to yourself and to your own inner truth. And so without genuine, rigorous investigation of who you are and what you feel and what's important to you, you're hosed. I mean, not to be too fatalistic, I'm not generally a fatalistic person, but that if you never put a single moment of thought into who you are and what truth is for you, and thus what truth might be for somebody else, you're never going to have a chance at understanding what an ultimate truth might look like. And without ultimate truth, we don't have a cornerstone to build a foundation of a society that's stable and just and equitable. One of the things that we're going to be talking a lot in this channel about, is racism. There's a number of reasons for this. One, it is a personal bother of mine because I came from a family who from a very early age taught me it's important to stand up against bullies, stand up against oppression, stand up against injustice. We came from an abolitionist family. We were very proud of that fact. And so to see the continuation of disturbing racism and lynching and hate crimes and violence and police brutality, when all of these things are obviously antithetical to any sort of truth, real truth, they're only true from the relative perspective of a society which is desperately cleaving to power. A wealthy class desperately cleaving to its own wealth. And when you're in a situation like that, when society is in a situation like that, you are in a crisis of truth, a crisis of lies, however you want to phrase it, however you want to frame it. The reality is things will not go well for you and will not go well for anyone you know until truth has been returned to its rightful place as one of the highest values and virtues that the society holds to. You can't lie to people and hold them in oppression and think things will be okay. They won't. They won't. They won't. And so, this channel and everything that I do is my gift, my contribution to the world, a world trying to figure out what is truth, what's a lie, how do we stand up for justice, how do we stand up for a better vision of humanity. I want you to know that I am here to support you. This channel is not about me. If no one watches it, I can just go on about my day. But the more of you that tune in, that watch, that share, that get value out of this and want to see more, I will keep doing them. Okay? I promise you. So, if you like this, please show your support for the channel. Send me an email. It shows up at the splash screen at the beginning of every video. And tell me what is bothering you. Tell me what you can't understand in the world. What just wakes you up and burns you up inside because it's so goddamn unfair. Tell me. Tell me, and I will help you figure it out. Even if that's something as simple as a family issue. Something that the rest of the world gets no benefit out of. Send me an email. I will try my best to help you see the truth in that situation. Because truth in an era of lies is an act of revolution. And this country is in dire need of a new way of being. We can't keep watching black people get knelt on and tased and beaten and restrained and euthanized and terrorized and God knows what else, just because we don't want to face up to the truth of this nation's history and what has happened here. And we don't want to come to terms with our individual guilt and complicity in this system. I am going to do everything I can to try to change that. With your help, maybe we can. Godspeed.